My conscience would not even allow me. You know, seriously, like, I can't do that for people.
Go ahead and just go ahead and start. I think that if people show up, that's fine. They can catch what's going on. We're going to go ahead and record it so that way that if there's anybody that didn't get to come tonight, that we can make it available to those who were invited. So,
And then the people.
well, Margaret Ann stepped out, I think, so we'll wait for her to get back in here. But I'm glad for everybody that did show up. I really do appreciate it. And we're kind of waiting. We're waiting for Margaret Ann to get back in here. There's Isidro. Hello.
Oh, really, guys? I gotta say the PD here. Yes, sir.
So we've got plenty of time today. I really wanted it to be casual, that way people could get a chance to chit chat and meet each other. And like I was saying a little bit earlier, we're going to record it, and that way that people that didn't get to come, they can see what the candidates are saying and who they are, just a little bit more from them. So this is basically our Lubbock Liberty Workshop series. This is the 5th of the series that we've had. One of them we had to kind of cancel, but it was scheduled and planned. We have covered some topics that are crucial to understand when it comes to our liberties, and those are at the core values of being an American citizen, being a citizen of our state, and the counties, local areas, regions. And we find that it's very important to pay attention to what goes on the local levels, what goes on, because that's the closest to us, that's the closest to the person. And so I thought it was interesting that we had several candidates for Justice of the Peace in Precinct 4, and so I decided to invite them to come and speak to us and give their perspective on, well, share a little bit about themselves, and also give their perspective on what they feel is important in being a Justice of the Peace candidate, as well as that position. Why is that position important to our liberties? And speak a little bit on their perspective of why they think that that position is important to our personal liberties, to the citizens in this area. And so we wish that there was a few more people that showed up, but that's okay, because we'll get going and we'll hear from the candidates. I do want to just tell you a little bit about myself. I am Amanda Smith. I'm a case manager for a health service provider in the area for a community. And I've been in the human service field for about 10 years. And so I'm an advocate for liberty, for personal freedom. And I believe that those values are important, as well as our Constitution, because I believe that that is the message that we send out that tells everybody that those things, those rights are inalienable, and they are inherent in all of us. Just by being born, I believe we have to have those freedoms. So sometimes I think a lot of people forget about it, and they will get into lots of things, business deals and all kinds of different projects and government projects, and I feel like we start losing our liberties more and more. And those things that we put so much resources into, like our governments, it starts to get a little bit too big, where the individual doesn't have as much say so in their life. And so that's why I think the Justice of the Peace candidates are important, and that position is important. And so I wanted to hear just a little bit from the candidates. I do want to thank Mallory Miller. He is one of the co-organizers for Lubbock Liberty Workshops. And Brian Thornton, he didn't get to be with us this month because he's studying for the bar at the end of the month. So we're very proud of him, and he's usually doing really great organizing these things and has everything together. So this was a little bit different this time, but we're gonna get it. So we came together to organize these workshops to discuss some of those things that are important to our liberty, like I was talking about. So first I want to introduce Anne Marie Carruth. She is one of the candidates for Justice of the Peace in Precinct 4. And we'll let her go ahead and come up and... So your time, 10 to 12 minutes, but you know, we're real casual. We've got plenty of time. So if you want to go over, if you just want to speak less, then that's fine with me.
No problem. Thank you all for having me. My name is Anne Marie Carruth, and you'll have to excuse my comfy boots and my big sweater jacket. We've been out block walking this morning, and it's also our son Thatcher's 3rd birthday today, so we've been juggling birthday cake and block walking, and anyway, we have a giant dinosaur cake at the house if anybody wants to come over afterward, because by no means are we ever going to finish that. Just a little bit about me. I grew up in Lamesa, Texas, which is about an hour south of here. Very much a farming and agricultural community. My senior year of high school, I won state in cotton judging, so when I drive by the cotton fields, I can tell you which one's going to class better at the cotton classing office. It was just a way of life for us in a small town. The difference that I grew up in, and a lot of my friends actually, is my parents were both in the legal field. My dad is retired now, but he practiced for 40 years, sat on the bench 2 different terms, and so I've only been licensed to practice law for 7 years, but I tell people I've been practicing law since 4th grade when I drew up adoption papers for my best friend Courtney because I desperately wanted a sister. So I've got 7 years of practical, licensed legal experience, but in some regard, this has been a part of my life since I was very young. I tell people I also kind of lived my own version of To Kill a Mockingbird. I didn't have a brother, but I had a wonderful mom, and so that story has sort of always resonated with me, especially being in a small town where people hear about everything that happens pretty early on. I came to Texas Tech on an agricultural scholarship, imagine that, and then stayed here for law school as well. Graduated in 2006. I've been licensed to practice since 2007. My husband and I moved to Houston right when we got married and lived there for a couple of years to kind of pursue some professional opportunities. We'd both grown up in West Texas, and we thought the big city glamorous lifestyle is what we needed to do, so we moved there. And as soon as we had a little fun and knew we were expecting a son, we decided it was time to get back to where the grass is greener. So here we are. When I came back to Lubbock, I opened up my own law practice. I have a general practice and practice everything from criminal to family law, oil and gas, probate, adoptions. I have the most long-term experience in those, as I just told you. So I really get to run the gambit of the types of area of law that I practice in, which, by the way, I think translates really well into a justice of the peace position. While I've been on the campaign trail, one of the misconceptions that I get is that, and Judge Stratton can talk to this, but a lot of people think, well, you just marry people. Like, that's your only job description is as a JP. And I think absolutely not. There's so many things that that court does, but most people think JP getting married at the courthouse. The Justice of the Peace courts hear a variety of cases, everything from civil lawsuits, small claims civil lawsuits, to truancy and evictions and criminal cases. So to say that they only practice one thing or only hear one thing is just not fair. It's just not the truth. I think that the Justice of the Peace position is extremely important. Obviously, it's part of the judicial system, but it is the judicial post closest to the people. A lot of the parties that go before a Justice of the Peace are unrepresented. So when you talk about justice and liberty, in my opinion, especially with a judicial post so close to the people, where they are oftentimes unrepresented, it's important for the trier of fact to be just that, the trier of fact. It's not the position of a judge to legislate from the bench or to decide cases based on their feelings or compassion. A lot of times they have to make hard decisions, and the law isn't always compassionate. It is what it is. And so for those people who are going before a judge without an attorney, I feel like especially need someone in that position with some experience and knowledge of the law so that justice can be done. that's just a little bit about me, kind of where I'm coming from with the position. I'm going to stick around for the rest of the program, so if you have any specific questions, I can address those directly to you, or if you have any questions right now, I'd be happy to do that. But I'll share my extra time with the candidates. They can talk longer than me.
We're definitely going to have some time for questions towards the end, and I figured hopefully we'll have some discussions about why everybody else thinks that justice of the peace is important to our liberties, and so we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But I do want to introduce Brenda Willis. She's another candidate for Justice of the Peace Precinct 4, and we'll let her tell us a little bit about herself and then what she feels is important about the justice of the peace and what it means to her.
I'm Brenda Willis. I was sharing with the other candidates earlier that I heard a saying the other day. Of course, everyone's heard early bird catches the worm. We've all heard that, right? We're the age that we've heard that. Well, the second one go along with that is the second mouse gets the cheese. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Anyway, I'm Brenda Willis. I was born and raised here, right here in Lubbock, Texas. I started back with Sonny Kazee at the Sheriff's Office back in '85. And so I've had a total of 28 years in law enforcement. In the jail, I did a lot of years in the jail because I liked it. And the jail teaches you a lot of things about dealing with people, and you sure better know their civil rights because they don't know them. And you never want to violate anyone's civil rights under any circumstances, regardless if you have eyes on you or not. You want to treat everybody with human decency and respect, and don't want to violate their constitutional rights by any means. I was asked the other day about a situation, and I'd never heard about it, where LPD had allegedly gone into people's homes and stuff without a warrant, and takes in homes. And so what we think about that? And I'm like, well, actually, I'm kind of appalled by the thought, because as law enforcement, as people in the criminal justice system, you don't want to see anyone's rights violated under any circumstances, or at least I don't. But anyway, those 28 years includes, of course, like I said, I did the detention division. I was assigned to the warrant division for about 2 years. So I worked that, and then I was assigned to the court division for about 8 years. And I held the position. I was appointed constable. I only did that for 5 months. My intentions was to do that for a couple of terms. But anyway, so I had a little bit of working knowledge of some of the paperwork that goes through. I know I didn't see near everything that goes through at JP's court. But it's like Anne-Marie said, a lot of people will show up in a JP court without an attorney. But even if they show up to represent themselves, you still need someone in there that wants to uphold their rights. Because I don't care if you make $20,000 a year or $100,000 a year, or if you know your rights, or if you're literally don't know your rights. You need to have a judge and someone conscientious and not violate your rights, and be able to fairly and impartially explain to you what your options are underneath the law, so you can make at least an educated decision about your life. Because, and sure, a lot of the things that go through there are Class C misdemeanors, which is punishable by fine. But you don't want someone to plead guilty of something that they might not really understand what the long-term consequences are. Of course, they have an option of going out and hiring their attorney, but and all you can tell them is what their rights are underneath the law and what their options are. You can't really go into, well, in 20 years you might decide this was a bad deal to plead. You can't do all that. You can just give them what their options are and let them make a decision from that. No, I think that's about it. I thought I had a bunch of educated things to say, and I've forgotten them all now. So.
It was the cheese.
It was the cheese.
Well, maybe they'll come to you.
Anyway, like I said, and I mean, it is an important position because people want to go and they want to believe, and they need fair and impartial treatment, and they need to know that their rights were not violated. And by that I mean, and there's a lot of eviction and truancies that come through the court, and you just need the law's pretty plain on what you need to do, and you need to be able to act upon that and not make it personal, and just, at least when the people come through your court, they need to know that they came in and they were respected as a human being and dealt with fairly and legally.
Thank you, Brenda. That was excellent. So we have Gary Vaughn now. He's another Precinct 4 JP candidate, so
Don't forget to mention good words.
I'll just prep, they're all JP4 candidates, so I don't know why I keep saying they're JP4 candidates.
People might, like me, will forget everything.
Well, maybe that's why I said it.
As she said, my name is Gary Vaughn. I'm married to my wife Alice. We've been married about 23 years. Have 2 biological children, and 21 years ago we adopted a newborn and have raised him up there in Shallow Water. I live in Shallow Water at this time. I moved to the Lubbock area in 1983. We left Lubbock in 94 and moved into the Shallow Water, and we're still there. I've got right at 36 years of public service background. I spent 2 years with the Plainview Fire Department. I spent 23 years with the Lubbock Fire Department. The Lubbock Fire Department, I retired as an engine company officer, overseeing an engine crew. I went through EMS. I graduated tech in 1989. She made me feel old a while ago. And went through the paramedic program there and became a paramedic. I worked with Lubbock EMS for 8 years. When we moved to Shallow Water, I volunteered out there for the first 6 years. Then we became a paid service, and I kind of took some time off there. I was the director when I left, and the service kind of went downhill, and the mayor came to me and asked me if I'd come back and run the service again, and we discussed that a little bit, and I did go back, and I've been there since June of 2009 as the interim director. So if any of you are interested in being director, we're looking for a director in Shallow Water. Come on out. During my careers, both of them, I've had to make a lot of decisions that have direct impacts on people's lives. Sometimes I make those decisions with very few facts and in a very short period of time. I think making those decisions over the years have kind of prepared me for this endeavor that I've decided to undertake here. I think if a person comes in and can present the facts and the evidence to me, the law is written. The law is the law, and it ought to be easily understood. When we look at the facts and weigh the evidence, we should be able to make a neutral, unbiased decision on who's right, who's wrong. I think I can do that without a problem. I know that when I'm kind of like Anne Marie, that I think that the JP court is the people's court. That's where they can go without any representation at all. They can bring their case in, get it filed, show you the evidence, show you the facts, and have that case decided. I think it's up to us to make those decisions and keep it fair and equitable, leaving our feelings and our opinions out of this. We shouldn't consider that stuff. Fortunately for me, you don't have to be an attorney to seek this position. So that's why I'm seeking it, is I think I have the ability and the experience making decisions to help people, that I can continue to do that. I think that to keep that thing where it's open and running smoothly is a key. Let people come in, their case be heard, a decision made, and they can move on. I had somebody ask me the other day if I had a problem with attorneys coming in if I got to be the justice. Well, no, if that's what people want to do, that's their right to do. But the point is that this court is where they can do that without doing that. So it's up to them to make that decision. I think if it gets where it moves up and stuff, then they can move on to where they need to with that. But I think most of the time, they can come, present their stuff, be seen, be heard, and hopefully we'll make a fair decision for them. I don't know how much supervising is there. I really don't know how many people that they have in the office there to work under the JP. I've been through and I've kind of watched some of the proceedings and stuff, but I've not really ever counted heads. I don't know who's in the back, who's in the front. I do have supervisory experience both at the fire department, at the city of Shallow Water. I've been involved in the hiring, the firing, the presentation of the budget, the management of the budget and the resources. It's not always a fun job, but it's one of those jobs that you have to partake when you're in that position. So I think with my experience there, the one benefit for me is I've been on both sides of that table. The years that I was on the city council in Shallow Water, it's kind of different deciding, going in and asking for $10,000 this year and sitting there and figuring out where that $10,000 is coming from. So I've been on both sides of the budget and been presented budgets as well as approved budgets. So it's, I've got a variety of life experiences out there that I think will come into play as we're working in the JP court. Okay? That's all.
All right, and we have one more candidate that's going to speak right now, Margaret Ann Brown. You ready? And then we'll have another candidate that will probably make it towards the end. Hopefully she can make it. Debra Burton, she'll be back, but Margaret Ann Brown for now.
Thank you for inviting me. All right, a little bit about myself. My name is Margaret Ann Brown. I am a Lubbock native. In fact, I am a Precinct 4 native. I married Alan Brown, 9/10/11. I will never forget my anniversary date. He is the owner of Absolute Protection Security Company. I am a proud mother of this little baby girl, Ryan Bailey Brown. I attended Trinity Schools through junior high, graduated at Friendship High School. I continued my education at South Plains College and received a degree at Wayland Baptist here in Lubbock. My areas of expertise include human resource, data entry, corporate sales, business management, and for over 10 years I have been a very active Lions Club member of the largest Lions Club in North America. A little bit about my qualifications, you can read my bio, but I have been working and supporting the Republican Party, and I consider myself a very conservative Republican. I have been a delegate to the Republican Party of Texas Convention, a delegate to Lubbock County Republican Party Convention, chairman of my precinct caucus, and a delegate to the Texas Federation of Republican Women's State Convention, vice president of Lubbock area Republican Women. And changing notes here a little, going forward. The JP Court is the people's court. I think this campaign should be about the people and the community of Precinct 4. I think this position has the unique ability to have a positive impact on the community while holding people accountable in my courtroom. And that is where I will be fair and honest. I will wear that robe with honor, working with the people, and I think that I know this job will be very satisfying. I get to work with the youth and have a positive influence on their future. And it is a big pleasure to be able to magistrate, be able to marry people. I'm fortunate where my mother did my ceremony and made that very special. I will leave my job that I have now behind entirely. I have thoroughly enjoyed my position at Body Works, but I want to pursue my career where I'm passionate about, and that's community service, serving the public. I am not seeking this position to supplement my income. This will be my full-time position. This will be my full-time job. I promise to work full-time for the citizens of Lubbock County. And one other story I have to tell. My father was a sales representative for over 40 years. It's in my nature to be great at sales. I've been with Body Works for working on my 5th year now. My mother has also played a gigantic role in learning how to be a good public servant. The first time I had a gavel in my hand was in 4-H, about 8 years old, calling meetings to order. I will wear the robe proudly. On one side of the courtroom, I will handle business, seeing civil cases and criminal cases. On the other side, I will be a great office administrator. I have been doing that for a company that has over 25,000 members. And with that position, it has gotten me prepared for this journey that I will be taking on from now on. I appreciate you again. Thank you for having me out.
Thank you, Margaret Ann. Well, I think that's all the candidates for now. This was just really interesting. Now, I don't know a lot of the history. I've been involved with politics since 2008, so 2007 actually, somewhere around there. So I really didn't know a lot about local level, especially because everybody's concentrating on the upper levels, on the federal government or the state government. And so nobody realizes, not a lot of people realize, that it's very important that we understand what happens on the local level, because that level is what is there first as a protection of our rights as individuals. And I know I repeat myself over and over again, but that's one of the most important things to me. And I hope that anybody that runs for any office at any level would have that as a priority in their mind, is that they want to protect and serve. And so this was just an interesting position, the Justice of the Peace candidate, because it deals with some of those smaller claims. And I know that there may be some people that have a lot of questions, and so we'll have the candidates come back up and we'll just take turns, and if you've got any questions for that particular candidate, or you could choose a candidate that you'd like to ask a question of, and we'll proceed with that. So does anybody have any questions for Anne Marie Carruth? Anne Marie, if you want to go ahead and stand up and see if anybody's...
One of the areas of business that the JP Court does is evictions. It would seem to me that that would be a horribly emotion-laden area of the law. Poor person can't pay their rent, they're going to get thrown out on the street if the court awards, issues the writ. How do you cope with the emotional dimension of the conflict that's before you?
You know, it's interesting because that was actually the very first question I got 7 years ago when interviewing for my first job. How do you give bad news to people? Are you good at giving bad news to people? I mean, how do you deal with that emotional side? And Brenda and I were just talking about it. I mean, with her involvement in law enforcement and mine with so many criminal cases and misdemeanor, I do a lot of CPS work as well, both as an attorney and volunteer. You know, there comes a point where you almost have to remove yourself emotionally from the situation, and it just takes practice. You know, at the beginning of my practice, when I would represent families that were going through a CPS issue, it was very emotional for me. And then you learn that you're there to do a job, and you follow the law, and you do what the law says that you can do. You know, in my position now, I'm more of an advocate, or I have to be an advocate for my client. But that does not mean that I do not deliver bad news to them, and that I'm not honest with them and telling them this is a battle that you can't win or that you don't need to win. So I've had several years of experience in giving bad news and in dealing with very emotional, traumatic situations.
May I add to that?
Yes.
I think two of the differences is sympathy versus empathy. You know, I can be empathetic with someone in the position that they're in for whatever reasons. But when you're sympathetic, I think that's when you get too many of your emotions involved, and you can't you can't, especially being a woman in hard jobs sometimes, you can't allow your emotions, because we are emotional creatures. But you have to shut it off to a point if you're going to survive both in your profession and as a human being. And just learn not to be sympathetic, but show empathy and deal with them from that level versus a sympathetic level.
And when you know the law and can apply that, and not that it ever makes it easier, but going to the empathy versus sympathy, if you know what the law is and you can apply the facts to the law, that gives you a peace of mind to say, I did what was supposed to have been done of me.
Thank you.
I already answered my questions.
You tag team, that didn't count.
I'd
You
like
knew
to
what the
hear what
question
Mr. Vaughn
was.
has to say about that too.
Gary?
Well, emotions, gosh, I'm probably the worst one to ask about that. When you're going through paramedic school and you're going to have to work with people of injury and illnesses like we do, one of the things they try to drill in you real hard is you're going to be scared. There's going to be times, am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right decisions? But you can never let the person see you sweat. And the reason for that is if you call 911 and I show up at your house and I'm going to take care of your emergency, and I'm shaking and I'm scared and my voice is cracking and I'm not comfortable, what have I done for your emergency? Nothing. I've not helped it, I've added to it. So for at least since 1989, working in the medical field part, the fire department's not quite as bad because you're in there, they're outside, you can do the things you have to. But in the medical field, the last cardiac arrest I worked was my son's kindergarten teacher husband. Can I show emotions in there in front of her and make her think that I'm not going to be able to take care of him? You can't. I have to agree with Anne-Marie. The law is there, and the best part of that is that that's what you have to stand on. This is not the easiest job in the world, but if it was the easiest job, we'd have people lined up out to the street out there wanting to do it. It's not an easy job. I don't think it's ever an easy job to put somebody out on the street. But if they've met all the things, if they've done all the things that were wrong, and the tenant has done all the things that are right and tried to make it right, then the law says that we have to do that. So I don't think I would have a problem doing it. Matter of fact, I know I wouldn't have a problem doing that. The decision-making process in the businesses that I've been in is not easy for employees even. But those are decisions you make. Can you follow these guidelines, our protocols, and do what needs to be done for the patients of illness or injury? And if you can't, then we need to move on. And there's been several times that I've had to let people go from their job even, and that's their livelihood. But if you can't meet the criteria, then we have to make those decisions. Okay?
Thank you.
Margaret Ann, did you want to comment on that, or on the emotional aspect, having to do some of those difficult things?
Sure. It goes on both parts of the party. You have to be, the sympathy, empathy for the landlords too. What else did I want to say? The position from the get-go, you're in Austin, you're there for 2 weeks, it's an 80-hour course. So across the board, it's equal where you go in and you have your school before you ever step foot in the office. So I know a lot of things, but the things I don't know, I'm going to learn and do a great job at it. Does anybody else have questions?
Actually, I do, and I'd like to, of course, present it to all the candidates. But dealing with truancy, I know that that's one of the large aspects of this position, and I think that it's so very crucial for our youth to have this example set to them at an early age, because in my mind, truancy leads to other issues down the line as they grow older and get involved into bigger or worse things in way of criminal activity later on in their life. How would you address the truancy issue, and how would you direct your court as to that issue?
Thank you, yes. I would make sure that they understand that I mean business, and this is a time for them to humble themselves and learn that they better get it right now, because if they break the law that I put down, which only, by fine, they're gonna get into a lot of bigger trouble and be behind bars. So I think that I'll be, good at being able to have that influence and put that fear in them that this stops now, you mind your parents and you go to school. That's better.
Angry, you want to speak to that?
Sure. It's interesting with juveniles because I feel like up to an age, they're only responsible for so much of their behavior. And I have practiced a lot of juvenile law in the past, and I will literally be sitting at the juvenile detention hall center with children who are being released after a couple of nights staying out there. But they can't actually be released until a parent or guardian comes and picks them up, and so many times no one is there to do that. So with truancy cases, depending upon the age of the child before the court, I think it's important to talk to the child, let them know how important their attendance is, that they're setting themselves up for better, greater things in the future, but also to sit down and have a conversation with the parents and to say, look, if this child is this age and can't get to school on their own, it's your responsibility to make that happen. You have to step up to the plate, be a parent, get them there. They're learning from you. At this point in their life, you are the role model. You're the one that has to get them there. And it's behavior that they feel like, well, if my mom doesn't take me to school, then why do I really need to go? So I think it's really twofold. You have to sit down, visit with the child, let them know the severity of what's going on and what they're setting themselves up for, but also having that conversation with the parents too.
And Brenda, did you want to speak on that?
Well, there's no easy answer to it. I think that parents surely need to step up and be parents, but we all know that so many times that doesn't happen. Unless you maybe hit them in the pocketbook as hard as you can, and maybe they'll realize, well, maybe I need to make my 13-year-old go to school. Because I was, when I was a deputy, I was sent out quite often to the juvenile center for hearings. And it was sad to the point because a lot of times no one would show up. For the kid to get out or for to hear that no parent of any kind would show up. But this one day, this mother did show up, and the daughter, I believe, was like 11. And they were going to release her, but they were giving the mother the guidelines of what was going to need to happen. You're going to have to come down here, you're going to have to pay $20. There's going to be a curfew, they have to be in a house at X number of hours. They can't leave until, I think, 7 o'clock in the morning. I mean, just, kind of restrictive. And then the mother was going to have to make sure she got to school. And there's a lot of restrictions on the parent, which again, we're dealing with 11, 12-year-old girls, so there should be restrictions on the parent for what needs to happen. And and I felt so bad for the little girl because her mother threw a fit. Well, why do I have to do all that? I'm not the one why do I have to do it? Like it was such a grief for her to even tell where her daughter was and how horrible that's going to be on her life. And the little girl just said, Mom, just tell me you'll do it. But they didn't release her because Mom's like, I don't know why I have to do all that. So the truancy thing it's a good question. There's no easy answer. It's going to take probably them working with the dispute resolution center, put some fines on the parents. And as sad as that is, sometimes the parents don't pay attention to it really starts costing them some money. And that's a shame that our society's come to that. Because I know what my mother would do to me and what she did to me at times as far as I was made to get up and go do what I was supposed to do. And that was to go to school. And so I guess I need to go home and explain to her how mean she was to me. But
Or we could get her to talk to us.
yeah, we could get her from here. But like I said, it's you just have to get in there and do what your part is on the law. And like I said, you're going to have to somehow try to make believers out of the parents. Because the children are going to be a product of the environment they're in. That's just the bottom line of it.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Along those lines. Do you have the authority to issue warrants for absent parents in truancy cases?
For failure to appear, if they fail to appear in court. Yeah.
And What about the resources of sheriff's department or constable's office? Or-
That would be issued to the constable to go perform. So,
Gary, would you like to speak on
I
that?
would.
All right.
I didn't put that there to help you, and I tripped over some. I didn't talk about it when I was telling you my work history, because I do deal with kids a lot. I teach classes, I teach medical classes, I teach at the high school out there. I teach hunter's education, gun safety classes and things like that with young adults. So I've spent some time with them, and a truancy deal is, she's right, there's no easy answer and there's no one answer fits all. Because, I mean, you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, because is this child a chronically ill child? So this child has doctor's appointments, she has illnesses that occur that they can't control. So yes, we need to talk to them, and they need to understand that she has to make school, but if it's things that are out of their control, then we need to be sympathetic with that type of stuff for this parent and this child. However, you've got the child that we just discussed, that the parent just, I'm not gonna get up. You gotta get up on your own and you gotta go to school. Then we need to look at those in a little different light. Education, I think, is a big thing for these people. There's a lot of people that just think, you know, if the kid doesn't go to school, they just miss a day of school. They don't understand the ramifications for the school system as well as for their child. And bad as I hate to say, some people, they don't care one way or the other. As the young adults get older into the junior highs and the high schools and stuff, then we need to make them understand. We need to educate them while we're doing this and let them understand that they think they're making a decision for one day. I'm cutting school today. Well, next week let's cut at school again. It's just one day, it doesn't matter. And they think it just affects that week, and it doesn't. It affects the rest of their lives. And too many times they don't grasp that because nobody's willing to sit down and spend that time with them and talk about them. So truancy cases they're going to be tough cases. There's, again, a fine. That's probably what the penalty is, but does that do enough? I don't know. I think the advocacy groups are going to be a big part of that, should be a big part of that, so that we can educate these people and the parents too sometimes, because that's where the problem lies sometimes, is with the parent, and sometimes it lies with the child. So I feel it's really going to be hard to, I mean, you're going to have to look at them on a case-by-case basis. You can't just say, every truancy I'm going to be sympathetic, or every truancy I'm going to be stern, or every truancy, because you don't know what's going on in the environment, is the way I feel on that.
Thank you. Any other questions related to that? I've got a question for all of the candidates. It's kind of a loaded question. So it made me start thinking about all of the laws that are out there, just all the rules, all of the regulations, all of these things that we are required to do, that the public is required to do. There are so many things, and at the same time, there are so many exceptions to these rules when it comes to law. And so a lot of people just get really confused, and they decide not to understand a lot of these things. And I'm kind of wondering, what kind of power do you feel like that you'll have on a case by case? You know, law seems like it should be black and white, but thinking that it's a little bit more, there's a gray area there sometimes. And so I'm thinking on the decisions that you have to make, the question is, how do you feel like you would look at a law, at any particular law, because you're basing your decisions off of those laws? What's the most important thing to you as you are looking at that law? What would you think of?
Can we really answer that if we don't know which law we're speaking? I mean, because there's such a variety, and I'm definitely not versed on all the laws out there, so.
Well, I'll give the law school answer, which Gary has already mentioned. I mean, as everybody knows, it is not a requirement for, you know, a justice of the peace to be a lawyer. It's not. In a lot of the larger cities, you will see justices of the peace who are attorneys or who had a law practice or who went through law school, because they do have that knowledge. But I will tell you that from my training, from my experience, the first rule of law is there is no ignorance of the law, so it is no excuse. And I have represented people in criminal matters, actually, where they said, well, I didn't realize that was against the law. Well, unfortunately, that's of no excuse. You know, we as Americans, as citizens, are given the opportunity to know our laws. We're supposed to know our laws. It's part of being a citizen of this country. So it it is no exception. I will tell you, though, that after being an advocate for clients versus being a judge, the trier of fact has the law to look at and to apply those facts to the law, which is a little more black and white when you put aside the sympathy and the empathy, versus being an advocate, what I do now, and think, how am I going to make this argument work to this situation? So I think that the most important thing for a judge to do in any situation, because we don't know exactly which law we're talking about here, you just have to look at the law. For example, in evictions, the two things you look at, if it's an eviction without damage, is simply, was money owed and was proper notice given? And there are a lot of reasons why probably money was not given, why it was not paid. But in those situations, those are the two factors that you look at, and those facts are applied to that law, and that's the only way to serve justice. If you start doing everything on a case-by-case basis and looking at the facts and saying, well, this is how I would do it in this situation, then we can't serve justice.
I just have a curiosity question. Are David Blackburn and Bob Blackburn related?
No. You would think, being with the same last name, same town, that they would be, but they are not related. They are friends, but they are not related.
I have another question about the law enforcement aspect of the JP office. I think it is true, and I invite you to correct my misunderstanding, that the constables work for the justice of the peace as opposed to somebody else.
No, sir. Constable is their own elected office, so they're their own boss, and with the exception of being an employee of the taxpayer.
Do they have to manage their own budget then?
Yes.
And make their own budget requests?
And you manage your own monies, but it's its own office. It stands alone. They're very close related. A lot of people that we even deal with, that constables deal with on a regular basis, think that you do work for the JP, but you're two totally different offices. Yes, sir.
I'd like to hear the other candidates' answer to that same question.
Okay.
To which one? The one that Anne Marie answered?
No.
No.
Does the constable work for you?
I'm going to echo Brenda on this. Each elected official, be it the county clerk, the district clerk, they're all their own separate entities, and they are their sole offices. They do not report to anyone other than the taxpayers, who of course, their bosses. But
I mean, she's the supervisor, the constable, and the secretary. She is it. She takes care. Do we refer cases to them? We do. When we need something done, a warrant, we talked about a minute ago, where she's going to have to deliver paperwork to somebody. If we've requested that to happen, then that's what we do. We delegate that to her, and it goes more or less to her office. It's not that we tell her to do that. We say, we need this done, and she takes that and she does that. So do they work for us? No, I think not. I think they work with us.
What does the statute say about that?
What do you mean?
I would have to look it up.
I don't understand what the question is.
What does the statute
The laws of
say?
the state of Texas, what does it say about the constable's relationship to the JP?
I don't know that it relates anything to that, except what our duties are underneath the law.
Thank you.
I got my iPad. I can look at it.
Yeah, I don't.
I would say the same that everyone else has already mentioned. You just have to have a good working relationship across the board.
Well, I'll explain the reason I was asking the question. Law enforcement is a dangerous profession, and one of the keys to successful law enforcement is excellent training. But training costs money, and it becomes a budgetary matter, and oftentimes I think budgets of sheriff's departments, police departments, constables' offices don't have enough money for the kind of training that I think law enforcement officers need, tactical situations, how to protect themselves as well as how they're protecting the public. And, if the JP is not influencing the constable's budget, only the constable's influencing that budget with the county commissioners, I guess.
Yes, sir.
That would,
Yes, sir.
that's where I was trying to find out about.
I think especially with the smaller communities, Lubbock's a big city, but I know the bulk of my training was with the sheriff's office. And when I worked with them, we did active shooter training, we did FEMA training, we did, of course, my education was from them. I have a master's police officer license. And as a constable, I had put in to attend the school in Huntsville. And that's just to learn the basics of the process, the civil process. Anything tactical. I know that the Constables Association, for lack of a better word, are trying to put together schools for like, for move outs. What do you do when this, I'm a pretty small female. I like to say I'm small now, I didn't used to, but. What do you do? Yeah, what do you do when a 6'1" guy comes at you? Well, I'll probably shoot him. But I mean, that all depends. I mean, if he comes at me with a knife, I'm totally, I'm able to use that amount of force if he has a knife coming at me. Because, excessive force begets excessive force. But now if he's just ranting and raving, I'm just going to do the best I can to get back up. But they do have all kind of, they're working on that. But like I said, to me, with a division of 1, our budget was $74,000, I believe. Most of the training that the constables get will be done through the sheriff's office. And they allow us they allow the constables to attend their training sessions and through SPAG Academy. And there's probably a lot we don't do because if you're out for a week, nobody's, the others will probably help you do the paperwork, but you're going to fall behind. So that is one of the lax things as far as constable position because you have a division of 1, and so you're not going to have a real big budget to go off to Austin all the time. They have an active shooter training for you every time. They have a tactical thing for you to go to. So you get into the schools with the sheriff's office as best you can because they train all that and they do allow you to attend for free. So that's what you do on that basis as a constable.
Does the JP have any influence in helping the constable achieve those kinds of goals?
No. Well, with that, because you're doing your own budget, you have to go, since you're your own boss, you're going to have to go before the commissioners, just like the JP does, and say, hey, I want to get this new computer system because it's so much better than what we have. A constable would have to go and say, man, in the state of Texas, there have been 10 constables shot this last year. I want to go to this active training school, but it costs this much. And prove to them, because they're acting as the taxpayers with the money, more or less. And you'll have to prove to them why you need that training. And usually just because I want it doesn't work too good. But I mean, you need point A, B, C, D, and why you need that training. Because a lot of times you are out there on your own. As far as doing move outs and stuff like that, I mean, back up a few seconds away because the sheriff's office will back us up, PD will back you up as a constable. But that's totally up to the separate offices to do their own budget and justify to the commissioners why they want what they want.
It's a challenge.
All budgets are a challenge.
My checkbook's a challenge, but
But you make it work.
yeah.
Thank you.
I think though, as constable, I've never really looked at your position. Do you have a working relationship with the sheriff's department to where if you have to go out and serve a warrant, maybe there's a history that you request help from them? Yeah, so they got like a mutual aid agreement.
And I assisted them quite a bit when I was a constable and they needed a female that a drug raid they were doing or what have you. And yeah, you have to. I mean, because the sheriff's office, he has, I don't even know how many deputies he has now on patrol, but notoriously they're understaffed. Because the Lubbock County is like 900 square miles. So it's a big county. But you have to, in law enforcement, you should work to have a good working relationship with all the entities because you never know when you're going to need them, and that PD officer you made mad last week might be the only one around the corner.
Yes. Well, I'm going to show my ignorance of the law. There's
Some concerns that I've got. particularly with property rights and such like that. And I'm not sure what court this would fall under. There's, Mallory brought up something about, I think JP Court would be the one to execute, I guess, what was your term? How did you say that?
Eviction notice.
Conviction, yeah, whatever.
Eviction.
Okay.
Writ of eviction.
There's a lot of discussion about property rights in this. The Supreme Court of Texas has come up with that the landowner does in fact own the underground water. And yet the state and the Texas Environmental Quality, TCEQ, Environmental Quality Outfit, and water boards and such like that have put it on the local High Plains Underground Water, I have to check myself, conservation district to implement some type of a strategy where the water is to be essentially theirs, I guess is what it is, because they're saying 50% of that is not yours. The court just a year or two ago, less, said that, yeah, it is theirs too. And yet we've got the High Plains District and their board has put off for a year or going into the second year now, the penalty phase of pumping what they have determined to be too much water to raise a crop. That gets into some pretty detailed stuff too.
Well, are they talking about well water?
Well water, yeah, not surface water. I think anything that's a river or anything like that is considered the state.
But there's a lot of laws.
Now, if this comes down and you've got a Supreme Court that says, hey, it's that individual's, and you've got another part of government that says, but we're going to implement a deal to where the truth of it is we're confiscating 50% of your water because we want it there in the next 50 years. And this comes down to penalties. Of course, they're talking meters, penalties, $10,000 a day and all this type of stuff. What court implements that? Where are the fines paid? Who do you go to for relief?
I would think mineral waters and stuff would go through district courts, would it not?
It's all district court.
Yeah.
It doesn't go up to a federal court unless there's some type of federal lands in the dispute. That's what our federal courts are for.
Okay.
If not, water rights, oil and gas rights, mineral rights, those things are going to go to a district court level. Thank goodness.
Yeah, 'cause you get into some
we're not going to
detailed
have
stuff.
to. Yeah, we're not going to be dealing with that. I actually do practice quite a bit of oil and gas, and so some of these, I say quite a bit. A lot of my clients own oil and gas interests, so I hear about these things kind of in proxy,
Yeah.
and they're dealing with them probably more than a lot of people making the decisions on these issues are. So I hear about them quite frequently, but it's not anything that I practice directly. I practice indirectly, through the landowner. But those are all district court issues unless there is some type of federal lands or federal program involved in the dispute. So that's not actually anything that we as JPs would be hearing.
Okay, so it's not a JP matter. Just
The only property issue, really, and I don't mean the only one, but of course the evictions, landlord-tenant types of things. If there's any property damage, if there's a civil lawsuit under $10,000, we would hear that as well. But in terms of property rights, as we hear about them, those are not a JP
or the
jurisdiction.
penalties that are assessed to it is all district court stuff.
Yes, sir.
Is that the same as eminent domain?
Yeah, well, it's different, but they're all related, because usually when you talk about eminent domain, you're talking about property, right? Your own property rights. So those same issues go through district court, and I have had some of those issues myself.
No, I know I've said this in district courts where they're talking about oil and mineral rights. It's like, boy, it gets into some complicated stuff.
Yeah.
It really does.
I want to take it one more step here, Ms. Carruth, you may be the source that I need to go to
Oh,
on
gosh,
this.
that might be scary.
Police officers have, even though somebody's speeding, doing 80 and a 70, whatever, they stop them. Actually, I guess the person has violated the law. But that officer has the discretion as to whether to actually cite or not. Does a district judge have that same area of decision-making as to whether or not they would penalize a private property owner in this case of a penalty for pumping over what will eventually be 15 inches a year.
I'm not sure I quite understand your question, but I guess the basic principle is still the same. Whatever law comes down and whatever the state of Texas says that we're following, if those parties come before that judge and the law is this, then the facts of that case are applied to that law, and then that judge would render that decision for those fines to be paid. So I don't know exactly how to answer that question specifically, but they do have, that is who will be deciding those cases. So if they've pumped 10,000 gallons of water more than they were supposed to, that district judge, more likely than not, is going to apply the facts to that law and fine them for that. I'm not sure how else to answer it other than applying the law.
You're saying, does the judge have the discretion to waive the fine?
Yeah.
I would,
Understanding that the Supreme Court just said that it did. But you've got all these funny things that goes on under different terms, that supposedly justifies a taking. And my understanding is, actually, I guess I'm getting too detailed in all this. If it's a taking, that's in the domain and it's supposed to be compensate the victim here. But anyway, I'm just curious, as it comes down.
And at the end of the day, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but at the end of the day, they do have some discretion with those things. I've gone before judges before where I thought, I can't believe that just happened, because it's not at all what you expect when you're going in there. And especially with property rights issues, eminent domain, oil and gas right now is such a hot topic, mineral interests, water. I was actually at the State of the City a couple weeks ago, the address, and the mayor was talking about the things that they were trying to do to preserve the water over the next 50 years. So these are actually all very hot topic issues. And so the judge does have some discernment in that and some discretion in what they can do. That's when you get advocates on either sides arguing, why this happened and why it should or shouldn't happen the way it did.
But I guess the answer, well, you've answered several things. I've asked several questions. Thank you. But I guess ultimately I was curious, is this a JP court matter? And no, it's a district.
So for any issue for the JP level, is there anything that could be waived? Are there times where you waive something? Are there times where there is an exception to the rules? Or is it always just enforcing the
there's
laws?
always
that are
an
there?
exception to rules depending on what the facts are.
I've got an example again, if I'm not stepping on you.
No, go ahead.
I don't know, I've kind of always been one where, unless there's an infringement on life, liberty, or property, an injured person, I guess that's what is referred to as English common law maybe, don't know, that there's not a penalty. And I don't know exactly, you get cited for speeding. There's no injured person, there's not been an accident, not anything. This is a penalty because there is a potential for an infringement, not the actual infringement. And boy, I want to say, where do you stop that one? That, buddy, you could go anywhere with that, which ultimately I think is revenue-based to begin with, kind of like the red light camera.
Well, in fairness to that, and I understand why you say that, because I think 20 years ago, LPD did have a quota they had to meet every day. But now, in fairness to that, we all know Lubbock drivers are not the best drivers, okay? If there were no restrictions, if there were no laws, how many people do you really think would go down a residential address, go at home, your area where you live, where your grandkids or your children play, going 50 miles an hour if they never had to worry about a ticket?
Well,
Many.
the only answer I've got to that is it happens all the time.
But you see what, but
And
see,
we've got
still they have a
this
fear of a ticket of
places
getting
in
caught. Imagine if that fear was taken away.
Well, I think that same argument was made on prohibition too. They'll be drunk.
Right, well, they can imagine what happens if they were to
Drunks
do
laying on the
Yeah,
road.
yeah, but if, I don't think they used to work traffic like they used to. But like I said, just picture no one being scared of being stopped or their insurance going up because of a ticket. it'd be very, very bad.
I guess where I'm headed with this, because this is
Any
a
law
JP.
that you write, though, any law that we write and that we're trying to enforce, everybody has their own interpretation of it. And I heard a guy make a statement the other day. I was in a restaurant and they were in a booth behind me, and a guy asked him, said he got a speeding ticket. And the guy said, well, how fast were you going? He said, I was going 12 miles over the speed limit. And the guy said, well, that ain't too bad. You know, it won't cost much. And the guy said, well, I figure I can drive however fast I want to, as long as I can afford it. So that was his interpretation of the law, is as long as I can afford what the fine is, there is no speed limit. And I think that's what Brenda's trying to say, is if you took that completely away and nobody was concerned about that, every car would be doing that, and there would be a whole lot more than what we got. There are some doing it because everybody, I mean, there are people that are going to make exceptions to every rule you make.
Yeah, and I think that would be the same argument made for the prohibition thing, and it didn't happen. I think we go to a point where we get so conditioned after 70-some years or maybe more of getting penalized for this that we think, oh my gosh, if we change this, the world's going to fall apart. And I'm thinking, probably not, that liberty has an element of risk.
It's sad. Oh,
Go ahead. No, I was going to say, I don't just necessarily disagree with you, but by the same token, and you're in the workforce too, like we all are. There's people that will never treat another human being like they're decent and they have any rights besides what that person wants to do. And if it was 50 years ago, we don't need as many laws we got. And I think we have too many laws. But we have those laws because for whatever reasons, people refuse to act right and treat everybody else with human decent respect. And until you get parenting skills back into people or what have you, you're going to have to do something. Society has to make society as a rule. We should govern ourselves and not let the government govern us. But we've allowed so many laws and so many rules to come into part. We've allowed schools to raise kids that I mean, I don't have an answer for you. I honestly don't. Because I think we ought to be able to live in a society, live next door to people, and not worry about you coming in and breaking into my home without some law saying you can't do that.
It is kind of sad that people are more worried about getting the fine going 50 miles an hour near the school than hitting somebody.
Exactly.
And that baffles me. I guess I just, after all my years in human service, I can't open my mind enough to think of that people wouldn't be. I mean, I'd be more worried about getting, having to go to trial and having to, be guilty of manslaughter than me get that fine. I'd much rather get the fine than,
How many
kill somebody.
speed through a school zone when the school light's on?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to tell me to slow down when there's a bunch of kids around. I slow down because I don't want to hit a child.
It comes down to
I don't
trusting.
really want to hit an adult, but I sure don't want to hit a child.
Well, it comes down to some internal values, like you said, like I'm the one that has to sleep at night. It's not about a fine or withstanding a trial, it's about the things that I need to do as a citizen and for my, the community and for myself and my family, not so much the fact that my pocketbook is $500 less for, a speeding ticket. But, the good news is, the JP court doesn't hear those types of things, but that's why we also have separate branches of government and we have people that are influencing the laws, and we're here to apply those laws to the facts and not legislate from the bench and try to make up our own laws as we go. I mean, we have the ability to just hear the case and apply that to the law and move on without legislating. So
I guess where I was headed with this, the JP court does handle citation traffic, speeding citation.
the
Right.
traffic.
So the JP does have discretion as to whether actually to enforce that penalty or not?
I don't know how much discretion that, because any criminal act goes to the district attorney's office. That's it. The DA's office handles any criminal offense, so how much, I really couldn't tell you how much discretion they allow the justice peace. I think you have a little bit as far as what actually happens to it, but any criminal offense goes to the district attorney's office. Even Class C's goes through the DA's office as to what the disposition is going to be on it.
I guess let me give you a specific scenario. I was making this up, but let's say you're running in a 70, and you're off out, gosh, I don't know, between, I don't know,
Spur and
Guthrie and Benjamin. you know,
Uh-oh,
and, you know.
you've been there, hadn't you?
But, yeah, anyway, you know, you're motoring up, clear road's a good deal, everything's great, but it says 70 and there the man is. And so here's the deal, does the JP have the discretion to say, yeah, you know what, there's really nobody around to have been injured anyway, and yeah, okay, can you dismiss that? Can JP dismiss that?
I probably would, even if I could.
So you would?
I wouldn't even if I could.
Wouldn't even if you could, okay.
I would say the discretion is there. I mean, there's always discretion in any position, you know, whether you're a business owner or a parent or whomever, there's some discretion in how you set that out. There truly is. I think what Brenda was getting at a little bit is, especially in some of these criminal cases or where the prosecutor's office is involved, they get this before the judge does. And so in some cases, they're going to determine whether or not they even want to bring that case before court. And so I think that's what she was getting at.
This
So-
is on the speeding ticket?
well, like on criminal cases or anything that's going to be prosecuted by the district attorney's office, they actually see the complaint before we do. So they're going to decide whether or not they want to prosecute that case or not. So they're actually have a little bit more discretion than the judge does, because they're the ones determining which cases they want to bring before the court.
I don't know if we can dismiss completely. I know we can probably, instead of a fine, a monetary fine, we can say you're gonna do defensive driving, or you're gonna go here. I think you can do that. And I'm talking a little out of my hat here, because I'm not positive. Because it's been, 1981 was the last speeding ticket I had, and I can't remember what.
I've never had one.
Margaret, do you have anything on that?
Gary said something about that gentleman that, you know, my pocketbook can handle this. It just, if it's in your court, you know, what am I trying to get at here? If he continues to break the law, he's gonna be outside of my courtroom and in somebody else's, and lose his driver's license.
So then it wouldn't be yours.
That's right.
Discretion any longer.
Well, thanks for the comments, I was curious.
A very specific question about, you are a peace officer, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So what is the difference? I mean, I've read a little bit about it, but it's kind of, there's some vagueness there. It's just police officer and that.
What do you mean?
Between constables.
What's the difference between a peace officer and a police?
Okay, well, it's jurisdiction.
Okay,
I
so
mean,
what level is it?
as a peace officer in Texas, your jurisdiction is all over Texas, really, mainly where felonies are concerned. In other words, if I'm in Austin, I see a felony go down, and I'm armed and have my ID on me, I can act on that, and the law actually requires me to. Am I going to dial 911 before I do? I sure am, because I'm going to have help on there, they're going to know I'm standing there with a gun. But mainly like it's like in the Lubbock area. Lubbock Police Department handle the municipality of the city, within the boundaries of the city. And it's just a courtesy thing, and that's just their area. It's not, they don't have like turf wars, but it amounts to that's their turf. And then, of course, the sheriff's office can handle anything because Lubbock County is Lubbock County, but they do the outside of the county. They go to shallow water slates sometimes, but those officers need back up again. You're talking about small departments. And then, of course, DPS, state highways. And it's just really a territorial thing, a jurisdiction thing. It's the same across the board. And that's on there's constable. Again, we stay pretty much to our precincts. We can go to any precinct we want to and act upon the law, but we you know, just have certain precincts. And it does. It makes it quite a bit easier. Then you have Texas Tech PD that they're Texas peace officers too, but they stay within the perimeters of Texas Tech.
I think the difference between peace officer and police officer is just a terminology thing.
Just
There's not really any
it's,
difference.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Of course, deputies and constables are better than PD, but it's another story.
I do have another question. As triers of the fact, you are looking at the witnesses that are in front of you, you're considering the evidence that's presented to you. How do you deal with evaluating the truthfulness of a witness. Because your decision is based upon how you make that evaluation as to whether or not what the witness is saying is reliable and can be relied upon by you as the judge.
Well, I think that'd be interesting, but how do you tell if someone's lying to you?
I normally don't know when they are.
I don't think it's all about looking at that person and know if they're telling the truth. What evidence do you present? You bring your paperwork in that says you've paid your rent. I have canceled checks for the last 8 months here in my checkbook and in my bank records. And the landowner has his records there that says I haven't received a check in the last 3 months. So I've got evidence here that says she did cut them, you did cash them because they're in her bank statement. So why is this not in your records? So you can't just look at, can anybody, I've got a veterinarian and 2 miniature donkeys, and he's the only one I know that can look a jackass in the face and tell what's going on, okay? You can't. You cannot do that. I mean, you're not going to just take it on their word. That's why we look at the evidence and weigh that out versus just, I mean, yes, testimony is important, but you have to look at the evidence and see what it says more than the person of it, I feel like.
I've had a lot of clients in criminal cases in particular try to tell me one version of the story even to their own attorney because they feel like they need their story out there. And I think that's absolutely right. I mean, in some regard, after dealing with so many people on a daily basis, I've learned some tricks and some things that they will say and things to look for when they're talking to me personally. I had a young lady get pulled over in Terry County not very long ago, and she told me, well, I presented my ID, but I didn't present it right when they wanted me to, so the police officer gets me out of the car, and they cuff me, and they take me to jail, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm thinking, well, then this isn't gonna, fine, if that's her story. So then I request the police records, and there's copies of everything in there. And it's not that she didn't provide her driver's license, it's she produced someone else's driver's license. So, I mean, you do have to do your research as well, and obviously as a trier of fact, it's what's presented to us. That's not something that we do, it's something that the parties do or that their attorneys do. But it takes a watchful eye to go through that evidence as well as talking to the parties to figure out there's always 3 stories, right? His, hers, and the truth, or this party, that party, and the truth. And so I think it's a lot of just dealing with people and having these kind of conversations with people on a daily basis. Because even as an attorney, when clients are coming to me and paying me to do something, they're not always upfront with me. So I do my own research and my own investigation before I even get back with them a second time. So you just learn how to do it. Right. But you just, you learn, you have experience doing it.
She's right, yeah. In the ambulance, why would somebody want to lie to me and tell me something's going on that's not? But I can tell you that we'll pick up a patient and he'll give us a story and we'll drop him in the ER and he'll give the nurse a different story and the doc will come in and he will get a third story. Really? What are we treating here? Yeah, exactly. It's the same way out there. You're going to get people that are going to tell you what you want to hear, and then you're going to get people that tell you what you need to hear, and then there's going to be somebody to tell the truth.
And I'm here to tell you there are good cons in this world that will make it, that they're lying to you, that they're lying to you, and they'll make you believe it. I guarantee it.
Well, you just have to go off the facts. I mean, this is why this position is a trier of the fact and not necessarily the persuasive parties. This is what this job is to do.
So on that, what is somebody, just one of y'all tell me what the oath is that you take?
I started to bring one today, and I didn't.
You want me to look it up?
Yeah,
I think it's going to come in handy today.
I think it's the same as, or right on the same as the deputy constable. I do solemnly swear or affirm.
That's not your testimony. You're about to give a
testimony. About upholding the state of Texas, the Constitution, and the laws of this state, and that you have received no gift in promissory to this job, something like that.
I thought you were about to take the...
No, it just says that. I started bringing them.
So it's a promise not to take any bribes?
Well, yeah, I to uphold the Constitution, the laws of the state of Texas, and that you've not taken or promised anything in lieu of this position. And I mean, personally, I don't, there's nothing worth your integrity. There's no amount of anything worth your integrity. Because once you give that up, you've had it. And I know as far as the legal profession heard, that's true, and I know it's true with his profession. That once you give it up, it's just gone.
Credibility is everything. If you lose your credibility, you've lost the battle.
And I'm just saying, that's not, I mean, and I think you agree with me. When we say that, it's not we're saying that we're mistake-free, because no one's mistake-free. The thing is once a mistake's made, you just need to tell them, yeah, I made a mistake. Because the funny thing is with the truth, you can't go anywhere with the truth. Seriously, people are like, because they have all this ammunition to use against you because they think, oh, they're going to lie, so we're going to do this. And then when you say, well, yeah, they're like, I wasn't planning on the truth. What I do now?
What happens now? Trial over. Everybody. Well, if there's nothing else, I mean, just from my perspective, if there's nothing else, thank you all for having us out here today. I've enjoyed the conversation. This is probably the most spirited conversation that we've been able to have, because most of the time it's more just a forum, you know, where we get up there and speak and we haven't had the chance to answer questions. I'm sorry, I'm not speaking for y'all, but thank you for having me and everybody. I'm sure they'll say the same thing, but I've enjoyed it, and I guess I'm going to get home to a third birthday party.
But yes, thank you everybody for coming. Y'all can stick around. We've got the room until 6 o'clock, so.
Can we get a picture of
Absolutely.
We want pictures over here, whenever Margaret and Golden. Yeah,